All right, y'all, welcome back to the Real Talk episode. We are going to be talking about pistols and holsters today. And I just want to preface this by saying, as you guys know, and I've said on the channel plenty of times, when I find something that I like, I tend to stick with it. And I do a lot of research before purchasing things. So I don't have a whole lot of experience in the holster game besides one company, Tier 1 Concealed, which we'll talk about for my concealed holsters. And for a duty holster, I've only actually ever run one. And we're going to talk about the way that's set up today and kind of what I like, what I don't like, and what I've had to do to it. But with that being said, let's start with the pistol conversation. Then we'll get into the holsters a little bit later in the video. But starting off with the pistol conversation and my pistol journey, I think it's important to understand where I came from and understand where my mindset's gone with as far as pistols go. So my first gun I ever purchased was actually a Smith & Wesson M&P, the 1.0 in 40 cal. I bought that when I was still in college. And that was my first pistol I ever bought in my life. When I looked back at some of the pictures I took of it, I thought it was so cool. It was very cringe, actually. And I look at how far I've come since then, and it makes me very proud of how far I've come, but also makes me realize how far the road is ahead. So always be training, always be working with your guns to become more proficient. But with that being said, guys, I started with that Smith & Wesson M&P 40 cal, and then after that I bought my Diamondback AR-10. And I think the next pistol that I actually purchased was a HK VP9. And the HK VP9 is a great pistol. However, what I realized was, let me just preface it by saying this, I don't like to go with the herd, or at least I used to not. I used to really resist what everybody else was doing. So Glock was the hotness, and for good reason. Everybody was recommending me to get a Glock, but I stumbled upon the HK. I was still holding on to the Glocks, and I really thought the HK was cool, and so I bought one. I really don't have anything negative to say about the HK, but as I came further in this journey and I actually finally purchased a Glock, I think the first Glock I purchased was a Glock 17. Actually, I know that. It was a Glock 17 full size, and I immediately understood why everybody loved Glock. Now, it was nothing against the Smith & Wesson or the HK. Actually, neither of those pistols, I think it should be said, ever gave me any issues as far as reliability went. They were both extremely, flawlessly reliable. I don't think I've ever had a malfunction with either of those pistols, and so I think that should be said. But when I bought the Glock 17, I wanted a full-size, like kind of nightstand gun, so to speak, and that's why I bought the Glock 17. Started carrying that appendix every single day. Don't judge me. I was using an OLED at the time. Again, just like most of us are on a fixed income, so OLED was a lot cheaper at the time than the Streamlight options or the Surefire options. So I got an O-Light, was carrying that every single day in that Tier 1 concealed holster. And I have a drawer full of holsters. I'm not going to pull all of them out because, again, I think it's, I might pull one or two out. We'll see. But that's just to say that I was carrying it every day and I was feeling it because I was carrying an appendix every single day. And as comfortable as that holster is, Glock 17 full size, it was not the most comfortable, and with my weight fluctuation, I tend to go up and down quite a bit, and I've recently, as we've talked about on the channel, I've been changing my habits to slim back down because it does just make it easier when you have less of a stomach to carry appendix, which is my preferred carry method, so lose some weight, right? It's the easy answer. But I wanted to get a Glock 19 to have a shorter slide length so that I have less of an issue sitting in my vehicle, for instance, when I'm driving, or just sitting down, or just for every day. When you're standing, you really, in my humble opinion, some of you guys might disagree. If you guys who carry appendix, let me know, comment down in the comments below. But when I'm standing, I don't really notice the difference in the length of the holster or the slide. It's more so the thickness of it. So a double stack, 19 is the same thickness as a 17. So, but I couldn't find one during the peak of COVID. I could not find a 19 for the life of me. So what I ended up doing was buying a Zeb OZ9, which I did a review on very early in the channel. And I really thought the Zev, I had an excuse, right? I couldn't find a Glock 19 anywhere. So what did I do? I bought a Gucci Glock, right? I bought the Zev OZ9. It had that modular chassis so you could change the grip lengths out, which was all good and fun. It had a threaded barrel on it. It was cool. It was a cool looking gun, but it was like around $1,800. And what I quickly realized after shooting it, and I was carrying it every single day, was that it had some trouble with reliability. And I'm not saying all Zevs have the trouble with reliability. I don't know. That was a sample size of one. However, in my experience, for the amount of money I paid for that gun and what it was promising, it just didn't deliver. I contacted Zev. They were kind enough to send me, before I ever, actually I had the channel at the time, I guess, but I wasn't anything, they didn't know who I was. I probably had 1,000 subscribers, if that. and they sent me two springs, two different spring weights, stronger springs to help with the malfunctions I was experiencing. And I think the main malfunction I was experiencing was it wasn't going fully in the battery. It would chamber a new round, but it would get stuck going home. So I ended up deciding that if I'm going to carry a gun every day, the most important thing to me is reliability. And so I sold the Zev. And I sold it to a friend, let him know about the issues, told him, all that stuff, gave him the different springs that Zev had sent me, because I could never get that gun to function reliably for me. So I ended up buying a Glock 19, and now moving forward, everything that you guys see behind me, everything that I want to review on the channel is something that I would consider duty rated, something that is high quality, it's going to be extremely reliable. And so as you'll see here in a moment, that's kind of where I've settled at. So got rid of the Zev, and the Glock 17 had always been reliable. And then I bought the Glock 19. So I guess we'll start with the Glock 17 since it is the first one that we bought. And I'll just show you guys the setup here. This Glock 17 has a custom stipple job on it. Excuse me, I just bumped this barrel right here. That I did myself. I did this double undercut myself. Definitely could have gone more there, but this is the first time I'd ever done it. And the stipple job definitely isn't pretty, but it is functional. I will say when you have an aggressive stipple like this, you will pay for it on the stomach. There's a bald spot on my stomach from when I used to carry this thing because this would just act like sandpaper. So, but the way this thing is set up currently is a little different than the way I had it set up originally. Obviously, it was an OEM slide, and I'll just show you guys the OEM slide here, which was also milled by Maple Leaf Firearms. And you'll see again, once I find a good company that does good work, I kind of stick with them. So this is a slide that they did. I think this is their agent cut. So it's got the windows in it, which I thought were cool at the time. And it's got a cross between a burnt bronze and a midnight bronze, I believe it is, color on it. So it's a custom color, rear iron sight forward. And yeah, so this is the OEM slide. Never had any reliability issues with this whatsoever. And this is their 5X slide, which they did send me to review. And I did enjoy this thing. I had a few reliability issues with it the first time around, and I had aftermarket parts kit in this slide. And so I put the OEM parts kit in it, and it turned out to prove reliable. So, and while we're here, let's just talk about the way I have it set up. The reason I have it set up the way it is. Some guys are gonna just go nuts about the sight radius and the reason the rear sight is forward. We're seeing this thankfully more and more, so I'm having to defend this point less and less as we go on. But the rear sight forward, if you're planning on running this slide with a dot on it, the irons are there for a backup. So when you have, they still remain there because they're great if something were to happen to the dot, if it were to die, if it were to go down for any reason. However, dots are so reliable these days, you almost don't even need sights. But since it is a duty or like an everyday carry type setup, I wanted to keep the ability to use my irons if I ever needed to. But putting the rear sight forward allows your eye, and people are like, well, when you're using a dot, you're target focused anyways. That's correct. That's 100% correct. But when you're presenting the gun, it's just one less obstacle for your eye to focus, because your eye is, obviously you should be target focused, but it's kind of like a little cheat. It's a little help to get you to focus less on the back of the gun, because your eyes need to focus as you're presenting the gun. You should be target focused, but it's just one less obstacle for you to look past. Yes, it's still there. Yes, it's taking up technically as much of the window as it would be if it were the rear, but it's a little less clear since it's through the glass, and it just helps you to not, it just helps me at least, and maybe some of you guys out there have never shot with a pistol with rear sight forward, but it does help me at least take one extra, I guess you could say, a training error out of the equation for me at least. So that's the reason I run the rear sight forward, because all of my guns, it is a requirement to have a dot on them. So I won't buy a pistol that is either optic ready or that I can send to Maple Leaf Firearms to get milled to put an optic footprint on there. Luckily, the industry is moving that direction. Almost every gun nowadays is optic ready. So that's a good thing. Moving back, I'll just finish what I actually did to this thing. Got the barrel TIN coated just for the looks. I wanted it with the window cuts, but it does increase the lubricity, I guess, how slick the barrel is. Does it increase reliability? It's a Glock. You don't really need to worry about that. But this is the OEM Glock that I had sent out to get TIN coated, and that's where the upgrades really end, guys. Everything else is stock. The trigger, the slide release, and magazine release. There's no magwell on this. This is a Gen 5 Glock, so these things are, already kind of flared in the polymer, as you guys can see there. So that's where the upgrades end. And while we're talking about the trigger, because what happened with this Glock is the same for all of my handguns. It kind of goes in the same respect. I'm carrying this appendix. Now, I know there's a ton of good aftermarket triggers for Glocks, And I know that machining has never been better than it has been in 2024. But in my opinion, if you train with your Glock trigger, like John over at Warrior Poet Society taught me early on watching his videos, is to release that trigger only to the wall, in which, let me do it from this side so I can see the screen. When you pull this trigger back and you reset it, you only reset it to the wall, and then you could pull, and if you need to break another shot, you're right there already on the wall. There's that little take up right there, and then you break it again. But I see so many new shooters, the biggest mistake they make is they let the trigger, they're slapping the trigger. They let their finger all the way out, sometimes completely off the trigger, and then they come back and jerk it again. So if you know your trigger, and there's exceptions to this. There are some really bad triggers out there, I will say. But Gen 5 Glock triggers, these are all polished. I did polish them myself with my Dremel, but that didn't really, in my opinion, did not help the break whatsoever. It really helped the reset. It helped like having a more smooth, positive reset, or clicky, I don't know. Polishing the Glock trigger when you're not removing any material, when you're just truly polishing it, doesn't do that much for the break for me. But they're good enough to accurately get hits at self-defense distances. And even, I mean, I've shot these guns 25 yards into A zones. I mean, it's not very difficult. Is it not as good as a 2011? Of course not, because it's just the nature of a striker fired gun. But this thing is pointed at something very important to me every single day, all day. So I want to make sure that it is stock OEM, drop safe, so to speak. Glock never had the issues that we're seeing with some of the SIG pistols. I know SIG's saying customer, user error and whatnot, but again, that's another reason I'd probably never go with SIG. Or I won't say never, but I'd have to shoot a gun a lot and it'd really have to gain my trust. Unlike when I buy a Glock, I'm just like, okay, it's ready to go. Throw it in the holster. Even if I haven't shot it, I know it's gonna run. So that's the cool thing about Glocks and Glock triggers. That's why I leave all my Glock triggers stock. Now, I'm not bashing anybody who wants to upgrade their Glock trigger. By no means am I bashing you. Only recommendation I have is use the same parts from the same company. Like, don't get this company's disconnector and this company, like get all the same parts for the whole trigger, because that way you don't have to worry about stacking tolerances. So that will cover a lot of what I was going to discuss with the rest of these Glocks, but that's kind of my mindset behind it. It has to have a red dot. I like rear sight forward. I don't like the windows anymore for a carry gun, just because, not that lint from like your pants and your clothes is going to jam up your Glock if it gets in those windows. But it's just like, I don't think it's really a necessary thing besides aesthetically it doesn't really add any performance improvement for me. Maybe it lightens the recoil a little bit because you're taking some material away, but the dot, I mean, it's just not a big enough difference for me to get any other slides with holes in them. I just think it's more of a liability than it is a benefit. So yes, that is where we started with the Glock 17. Then we went to the Glock 19 here. And as you can tell, this one is also milled. This is their duty cut from Maple Leaf Firearms, and they don't sponsor the channel. They didn't sponsor this video, but I paid for this duty cut. I paid for this cut. I paid for a bunch of cuts before they ever sent me the 5X slide. And actually, I paid for my 19X cut as well. But just so you know, they just do good work. It's not like they're doing it for free for me, and that's why I keep going to them. They just do excellent work. But what I learned from that whole Zev experience was that it's better to just get a stock Glock and upgrade the OEM parts. So I still have a stock, everything in here is stock. The barrel, the guide rod, the spring, the trigger, everything is stock, including the slide. It's just now it is a little bit more grip up front for those cool guy press checks, and they opted cut it as well because this was not an MOS. So this is an RMR footprint. I have the 509T up here, but again, rear sight forward, their duty cut. This was one of the gray Glocks that came out. I saw it at Academy, thought it was cool, and I bought it. So again, this one I would like to double undercut because I am running out of real estate for my grip here, as you guys can tell. But again, Gen 5, pretty good trigger, pre-flared magwell from Glock, and this was one of my go-to. This was probably my gun I carried the most in the last 2 years, up until I upgraded to this new holster, which we'll get into in a moment here. But while I'm at it, let's just talk about the last Glock. And this is the 19X, and this is the everyday carry currently. We talked about this in the EDC video, and I'll just go over it very quickly for you guys who didn't see that one. But we have a PMM comp on here, Zafari Precision barrel. I know Zafari Precision is a pretty cheap company, but I've never had an issue with this barrel. It's worked phenomenally. The accuracy is great. Everything's great. This is their Valkyrie cut on here. So Maple Leaf Firearms, once again, it's got like this really nice diamond-like texture on the slide. I don't know if you guys could see that if it's coming across in the video, but it's kind of like a diamond pattern up here. Cool texturing. Again, cut it for an RMR because the 19X does not come optic ready. So they cut it for an RMR, rear sight forward. I'm running 511, Ameriglow 511G suppressor height sights, so I get a little bit of a co-witness, lower 1/3 co-witness there, and then just an American flag backplate because America, you know what I'm saying? SLR Rifle Works magwell on there as well, and that's where the upgrades end until my, I believe it's Cogworks extended slide release that comes up and over, because one issue I have been having with all my Glocks is when I'm presenting, I got really meaty hands, so when I'm holding the gun out and I'm shooting it, I tend to kind of either hold this slide release down or push it up sometimes, and that'll cause, obviously, issues when you're shooting and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, why didn't it lock back, or why is it locking back when there's still another round there? So, and also Streamlight TLR1 HL, which is the light that is cut for the Tier 1 concealed MSP holster. MSP stands for Modern Samurai Project. This was a collaboration between Tier 1 concealed and Modern Samurai Project. And let's just talk about the holster, because the gun is only as good as how quickly you can get to it. Obviously, if you're carrying it in a bag, it's a lot slower, it's a lot less secure than having it on your person in the appendix position. So the Tier 1 concealed MSP really changed the game for me, because like I said, I have a drawer full of holsters like most of you probably do. The first holster I ever got for that HK was like a Black Hawk or something like that, or a We the People holsters is actually what it was. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it wasn't cut for a light. So that's the last thing I forgot to mention. A gun must have, it doesn't need the comp. It does not need the comp. The comp does help. And when you shoot them back to back, even when I shoot my 17 and then I go to this 19X with the comp, it's like a night and day difference as far as how quickly I can get follow-up shots because of that PMM comp. But it must have a red dot on it, and it must have a light on it. Those are the two requirements for me, and it must be reliable. So this gun, and because the MSP, the way it works is it actually indexes on this light right here. So you can put any firearm that will fit this light on it will essentially fit in this. Besides like a wheel gun. I don't know how many wheel guns have rails on them for lights, but this gun fits in here, and it's got an open bottom so that no matter how long the gun is, if you had a 17 with a threaded barrel or a 34, a Glock 34, I even put the new FN 545 at my local gun store. I threw this light on it and threw it in here. It fit just fine without any adjustments whatsoever. But you can actually just change the tension on it so you can get the retention with the pistol you have. It'll fit CZs, it'll fit SIG, it'll fit HK, it'll fit Smith & Wesson, anything, pretty much any modern striker fire pistol that I've put in here, including 2011s and including the Springfield Prodigy, which we'll bust out here in a second, will fit in this holster. And that's why it's so important to me to have that OEM trigger. Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but this is pointing at something I do not want to have a bullet hole in. So I love this holster, and what this holster allows me to do, although it is big, so that's the downside of this. It fits pretty much any pistol you could throw at it, right? But the downside is it is very large. So I'm a big guy, I'm 6'1", 245 pounds, and I can conceal this really well, even with this magwell on here. This is my everyday, I carry this every day, everywhere I go, and it is, unless I'm like really not paying attention, I might be printing, but I really rarely print with this thing. Now, obviously there's steps you need to take to be able to comfortably carry something like this every day. I usually go up size up in pant size. I usually wear a little bit of a more baggy t-shirt, a little bit longer t-shirt that kind of helps conceal it better. But those are kind of my requirements for pistols, and that's what threw the Zev out of that running. The HK was just fine, and I actually just gave it to my brother because he needed a pistol, but that's the only reason I don't have it today. There's nothing wrong with it. Maple Leaf also cut that for a red dot because it was not one of the tactical versions with the optic ready mount. So those are what I look for in a pistol, especially when I'm going to carry every single day. Now, maybe one day I might buy, a Desert Eagle. That'd be fun, but that'd be more like a collection item, something just to feel, just because it's cool. Even 1911s, as much as I love a lot of these really awesome operator style 1911s that have a light rail on them, again, it has to have a rail for me. I'm not going to buy a 1911. Personally, I'm not buying a 1911 unless it has a rail on it, which I know that's against the original design and whatnot, but a lot of these really cool 1911s, it's just like 7 rounds of 45 ACP or 8. I'd rather just get the FN 545. And FNX Tactical, FNX 45 Tactical was a great pistol, super reliable, awesome to shoot suppressed. But 9mm. I think with modern 9mm expanding ammo, I run the Federal HST 124 grain. I think it's just been proven that it's not about the caliber, it's more about shot placement, and you just get, even though the FNX had 15 rounds of 45 ACP, I get 17 with a flush fit mag in here, and I have a backup for 23. So I just kind of tend to stick with 9mm now. With that being said, let's move on to the Springfield Prodigy. I'll just bust it out since we're talking, and we'll finish up the pistol portion. We'll talk more about the holsters, but this guy has gone through the 500 round initial impressions review, and we're going to be taking this thing out to RPR tomorrow to continue some testing on it, get some more shooting with it. One thing I did add was the Terran Tactical Magwell. For those of you guys who are wondering, I blacked the logo because I don't like to have loud logos on my stuff. For those of you guys who are wondering, this did not fit on here. I did have to Dremel off the little rails on the sides of the bottom of the Prodigy, and then I did have to use, when I put the pin through, it was kind of sticking down just a little, ever so slightly, just angled down. There's a little gap, and I'm a perfectionist, so I didn't like that. So I just used some Gorilla Glue on the inside here, if you guys can see that right there. And I just put a bungee cord around it and snugged it up like that. So it kind of JB welded, I guess, redneck engineering, got it to be seamless. It really is flush. And if that ever breaks, just put more Gorilla Glue on there and just do it again. But we'll see. We'll see when we go to the range. I'm really excited to start using this magwell. It's really nice. It looks freaking great on here. And the Prodigy, as you guys can see, has a light rail on it. So I only have one stream light right now because, you know, budget and new baby. So I only have one light. So when I want to carry something else, I just take the light off the Glock 19X and I throw it on whatever pistol I want to carry. But this gun only started to malfunction around the 415th round, and it just started to get a little sluggish. I've read tons of comments about how this thing had the Cerakote on the rails was just a little thick, and so right after you shoot it, once you clean it, you won't have those issues anymore. So we will find out. We're going to be doing some more shooting with this thing tomorrow. I'm really excited to shoot this thing. It's a phenomenal gun to shoot for, especially for the price. Full disclosure, Springfield did send this to me, but I did buy my own optic plate long before they ever said they'd send one to me because I wanted to buy this before they offered to send me one. So I was planning on buying one of these. I heard about some issues they had early on. I held off. I was thinking about a staccato, and then I reached out to Springfield, and they were nice enough to send this to me. So thank you, Springfield, for that. We will be doing some more testing on this, but again, we have a somewhat reliable pistol. I mean, 415 rounds nonstop, getting it very hot before it had a malfunction. I don't have that issue with my Glocks, but again, we're going to continue to test this to see if that was just a break-in period, so to speak, and then the jury will be out. If I decide to start carrying this, it'll have to be reliable. I'm talking like 0 malfunctions in 1,000 rounds. That's kind of reliability I look for, that are not user error or user inflicted rather. So the jury's still out on this, but again, somewhat reliable pistol, red dot on it and a light rail. So really excited about this thing to go shoot it tomorrow. It is a peach. It's kind of like a cheat code how good the trigger is in this thing. So, and let's just go to the trigger while we're at it. So we are clear. Safety's off. Bring it up nice and close so you guys can see. So a little bit of take up there. And then it's a clean break from the wall. And this trigger did get better as I shot it, I will say that. So reset. I overshot it a little bit, but it is a little bit of a longer reset, but incredible, like no creep after you hit the wall. So really great pistol. And let's move on to the holster conversation since we don't want to make this video 4 hours long. So what I'm running is the Tier 1 concealed for my everyday carry. This setup right here gets me out of holster, on target, first round shot at about 1.5. My fastest is like a 1.35, 1.4, but consistently like a 1.5 to a 1.7 or a 1.8. So pretty darn fast, and obviously that's with me as a shooter, but I train quite a bit. I will say they have this really cool target at RPR that has these little circles, about 2.5, 3-inch circles inside of a larger target, a larger man-sized target. And I did some drills there where I was drawing to first shot and shooting 2 of those smaller plates in the chest and then one of the head plates. And this 19X just really, I was having an on day. It was a pretty good day for me shooting, but with this holster, actually that was with the holster over here, which might as well just talk about it. But let's bust this guy out. So this is the Safariland holster. It's a level 2, I believe. So it has the one lock right here. It's got the thumb release right there. So you got to sweep that down as you draw the pistol out. And I actually had to modify this to fit the 19X with a PMM comp. So I just Dremeled this out. Some would say, I don't know if that's going to, you know, I don't know if that's going to weaken it too much, but I haven't had any issues with it yet as far as that one range trip went, and the jury's still out on that. But I didn't want to have to run my 19 slide on the 19X because I like having the comp on it. So, and it's a outside the waistband duty type holster, so why not? I'll just show you guys how this fits in here. So you can see this is cut for, this is one of the Safarilands that has the slot for the optic there. Oh, I have the wrong light on here. Sorry, so I can't. It's actually cut for the Streamlight TLR 7 sub, I believe. No, the TLR, let me see. Don't have it up here right now. It's in my range bag. So if I could do it all over again, I would have definitely gotten the Safariland for this light, obviously, but you live and you learn, guys. Those are like $160 for a holster. So yeah, I can't actually show you, but the comp just goes right through the bottom there. It's very simple. And I love that setup because this pistol, it's a full-size grip. It's got pretty much a full-size slide with the comp on there. And again, the recoil on this thing is just phenomenal, the recoil control. So that's the setup for this holster right here. I do have a leg strap. I don't have it to where it's a double leg strap. I have this little piece right here. I don't even know what they call this piece, but it allows it to be a lot higher up because once you start running with your pistol on your leg, you'll learn very quickly that it's just gonna flop everywhere. So the higher up you can have it and still have it comfortable to draw with, the better, in my opinion. So I really love this setup, and this has been my go-to holster setup for a while, but it's the only holster because, again, it's budget, guys. Budget is the biggest constraint for a lot of people. So I don't want to have to buy, eventually I probably will buy another holster for the Prodigy if it proves reliable. I would love to have a outside the waistband holster for my war belt for the Prodigy, but most likely I'll just end up getting another holster for the Glocks with the Streamlight, or like a Surefire if I end up going that route with the Turbo, because the Turbo looks pretty cool as well. But that's it. That's going to be essentially what I wanted to cover, was what I look for in a pistol and why I look for those things, because I had that experience with that Zev that was, again, and I've never shot a Shadow Systems. I hear they're great, but I just, for me personally, it's like if you need to put a break-in period on the box, then I mean, why doesn't Glock have to put a break-in period? Why doesn't HK or any of these other companies have to put a break-in period on there? I know, again, I know they're a local company here in Texas, so I like to support local companies, but when my life depends on it, I'm just going to be grabbing the Glocks. So I guess that's pretty much all I have to say. If you guys have any questions, let me know down in the comments below, or you can hit me up on IG as well in the direct messages. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me and communicate with me, because I'm trying not to read the comments anymore because they're not healthy to read. But with that being said, if you guys do want to support the channel, there's really 4 ways you can do so. There's a super thanks, which is the easiest and most direct way to help the channel out. It's a direct contribution to my YouTube fund. That is down below in the video. And then from there, Brownells, bro code RDB10 saves you 10% off at Brownells and also supports the channel. We have rangedaybro.com for any merch. We have the Pro Gun Club shirts on there, as well as the gun charms and a bunch of other designs and whatnot, and hoodies. And then lastly, we have liking, commenting, subscribing, guys. It's played out, but it is super true. The algorithm demands the engagement, and that's how they promote these videos, and that's how you can support the channel as well for free. So thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any questions, any comments, let me know over on IG or down in the comments below. And love you guys. Have a good day.